Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's discussion about CenterPoint's proposed electric rate hike. I am Bryce Gustafson, program organizer with the Citizens Action Coalition. I'm joined tonight by our phone canvas director, Kelly Hammond, and our executive director, Kerwin Olson. We want to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy day to be here for this important conversation. We'd like to start with a very brief background of Citizens Action Coalition for folks who do not know who we are. CAC is Indiana's oldest and largest consumer and environmental rights grassroots group. We got started way back in 1974 during the first energy crisis here in the US by a wide variety of folks who got together and decided enough was enough. Through the years, we've worked on a variety of issues, including pollution control, healthcare, public transportation, redistricting reform, and farming issues through our education fund. But our main focus today, as it always has been, is to watchdog the utility companies here in Indiana for residential ratepayers. Whether it's organizing countless Hoosiers across the state, engaging in cases at the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, giving a voice at the State House on behalf of consumers, or taking the utilities to court, we work very hard to protect Indiana citizens from the excesses of the monopoly utility companies. Ultimately, in our 47 years, because of people like you getting involved, we've been able to save Hoosier ratepayers $10 billion in excessive bill increases. So thank you for your support, and thank you again for being here tonight. Before I pass the mic to Kerwin, just a few housekeeping notes. We are live streaming to Facebook. You are more than welcome to ask questions there, or for those on the Zoom call, you can use the Q&A section. We will have time at the end of the discussion for questions and answers. And if we can't get to your question tonight, we will do our best to get back to you with an answer. That is all I have for now. I will give the floor to Kerwin. Thank you, Kerwin.
Great. Thanks, Bryce. Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight for this discussion about CenterPoint. Now, if technology cooperates, I will share my screen and begin my discussion. Yeah, I'm going to start out with a little background here, and then move into the case. Those recently involved in the discussion around the CenterPoint rate hike might have encountered the two agencies that are responsible here in Indiana for oversight and regulation of our of utilities here in Indiana. The first one being the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, or the IURC. They are the regulator. Their primary function is to act as a surrogate to competition. Let's keep in mind these are monopolies who have captive ratepayers and no competition. So we created these regulatory commissions under the guise, if you will, as being a surrogate to competition to, keep monopolies in check. There are 5 commissioners at the IURC. They all serve 4-year terms. State law says that one commissioner, one of the 5, must be an attorney, and they are appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the governor. We're actually one of only 3 states where there is either no direct election of those who regulate the investor-owned utilities, or there are no approval hearings before one or both of the legislative chambers. In Indiana, they are appointed by and serve at the pleasure of the governor. State law also states that no more than 3 of those 5 commissioners may be from the same political party, although always been a little bit confused about what party affiliation necessarily has to do with regulation of utilities, but so be it. That's what the law says. Also, they are a creature of statute. I put that in quotes because that is what the IURC says about themselves, that they do not set policy, that they are a creature of statute empowered by the Indiana General Assembly and the powers that the legislature gives them. The other agency you've probably encountered as well is the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, otherwise known as the OUCC. The head of that agency is known as Indiana's Consumer Counselor, also serves 4-year terms. That individual must be an attorney, and that individual as well is appointed by and serves at the pleasure of the governor. They are the statutory representative of the public before the IURC, and that is the public generically. That means in theory that they represent all ratepayers, residential, commercial, industrial, transportation, as well as state policy in general. And just to be clear, the OUCC is not a regulator. They do not make the final decisions in these cases. They intervene, they provide testimony, they participate in the cases, make recommendations, but they are not the ones who make the final regulatory decisions. A little bit of background on CenterPoint very high monthly electric bills. Since 2005, their residential electric bill for customers using on average 1,000 kilowatt hours a month has increased 84%, nearly doubled. I've got up there the 4-year trend anyway for CenterPoint electric bills, and to the right there you'll see the average bill for all of the Indiana IOUs. IOU stands for investor-owned utility. And for those that are unaware, we have 5 investor-owned electric utilities in the state of Indiana: CenterPoint, Duke Energy Indiana, AES Indiana in Indianapolis, formerly IPL, Indiana Michigan Power, and also NIPSCO, Northern Indiana Public Service Company. And CenterPoint since 2005 has been substantially higher than the other Indiana utilities, although that delta is starting to close a little bit. But anyway, the folks down in Evansville and CenterPoint service territory really have struggled with the highest bills in the states and some of the highest bills in the country for a city, mid-sized city the size of Evansville. That's a real burden, not only on business, but also especially residential customers and vulnerable low-income households struggling to make ends meet. You might ask why? Why has CenterPoint bills gone up that dramatically since 2005? I repeated that bullet point since 2005, increases of 84%. And I got a quote here from former CEO Carl Chapman from a previous case at the commission where he pointed out that since 2005, the company invested around $500 million on their coal plants. And absent such investments, the units would have been retired. In this quote, he points to compliance with EPA environmental regulations that required that capital investment. Well, first of all, there's another way to comply with air regulations, and that's stop emitting the poisons that those facilities emit and move towards clean, renewable, sustainable energy that has no emissions. But it's also important to understand that, the mid-2000s is really when the clean energy transition conversation started to begin in earnest, if you will. Climate change was becoming more of an issue. We'd seen some price reductions, at least in wind power at that point in time. We had miserable levels of investment in energy efficiency in Indiana. And beginning about that time was also when we were talking about policies such as renewable energy resource standards, energy efficiency resource standards, and CAC and others were working hard to pass that type of legislation and urging the Indiana utilities to stop throwing good money after bad by investing significant sums in these coal plants, which were enormously expensive, enormously dirty, and that we would be facing skyrocketing energy bills when what we should be doing is transitioning immediately to clean and renewable energy and investing in energy efficiency rather than throwing good money after bad, because we'd face what we're facing right now. And that's an enormous amount of sunk and stranded costs in Indiana coal fleet. And so from our perspective, the reason CenterPoint bills have increased so dramatically is the business decisions that company made in the mid-2000s by going all in on coal rather than beginning to diversify their resources. Now we're going to start to get into some background on the filing before we talk about the actual filing. This slide refers to the 2016 Integrated Resource Plan of Vectren at the time. Every 3 years, Indiana utilities are required to file what's known as Integrated Resource Plan, which really is a 20-year planning document about how they are going to serve their customers. What resources are they going to procure to ensure that they have both the capacity and the energy on hand to provide customers with their legal obligation to provide power. Utilities are in a constant state of planning, but these IRP documents are a 20-year snapshot in time. This is what we're going to do. These are the resources we're going to build, procure, retire to make sure that we can serve our customers' needs over the next 20 years. Well, they filed their integrated resource plan in 2016, and there was some good news from that particular IRP, and that's that they were going to retire a lot of their coal, most of their coal. In that IRP, they were planning to retire the Brown coal-fired power plant in 2024, Cully Unit 2 in 2024, and at that time, they were going to exit the joint operations of Warwick Unit 4, which they share with Alcoa, in 2020. And at that time, their planned replacement resources was they were going to replace that capacity and that energy with just a little bit, 55 megawatts of new solar, and a massive, almost 900 megawatt fossil gas baseload power plant, the combined cycle combustion turbine. So effectively just trading coal for gas. Had that portfolio come to fruition, that would have been about 17% coal, 63% gas, and basically staying almost exclusively reliant on fossil fuels for their resources. So that was their plan in 2016. What happened related to that generation transition plan that they had back in 2016? Well, on April 1st of 2019, they did receive approval for that 50 megawatt solar project down in Southwest Indiana. I'm sure folks are familiar with that by now. It's online and running there in Spencer County near Troy. But then on April 24th, 2019, this was sort of the shot heard around the world, if you will. Vectren had filed for approval of a nearly $1 billion, 900 megawatt combined cycle fossil gas power plant. And for the first time in most of our memories, the IURC rejected a request from a utility to build a new power plant. Effectively, the IURC said, no, you cannot build that power plant, and denied the company's petition. And in that rejection, what did they say? Well, these two quotes sort of speak to what the IURC said to the company in support of their rejection of their resource. And it was basically largely about two issues. The first quote is the proposed large-scale single resource investment for a utility of Vectren South size does not present an outcome which reasonably minimizes the potential risk that customers could sometimes face in the future, be saddled with an uneconomic investment, or serve to foster utility and customer flexibility in an environment of rapid technological innovation. What they were basically saying there was that's a pretty risky investment. You're putting all of your eggs in one basket. We're seeing lots of decline in prices of renewable resources, energy efficiency. This is a really risky investment and not the best idea for your customers, as you may saddle them with future stranded costs, and it's too much risk for your customers. And then they also directed the customer looking forward. I won't read this quote, but they talk about Vectren being scheduled to submit a new IRP in November in 2019, and they effectively told the company, please do it again, do your IRP again, and make sure that you thoroughly analyze and evaluate all of the possible options for continuing to meet your legal obligation to provide reliable, efficient, and economic electric service to your customers. So they basically said, do it again. You can't build that gas plant. Too expensive, too risky, and your planning process wasn't the best. So come back to us later with some better ideas. So CenterPoint had their 2019 IRP process that extended into 2020. They asked for an extension. They were supposed to file November of 2019, but they didn't file until, I believe it was June, maybe July of 2020, I think June. And they filed their new generation transition plan. Effectively, the resources leaving their system was the same. That's 730 megawatts of coal. Both of the units at Brown retiring by 2023. Cully Unit 2 retiring by 2023. Rather than exiting the joint operations at Warwick in 2020, this outlined exiting those operations in 2023, but still the same end result of retiring 700 or retiring all but the 150. Exiting operations at Wart is in retirement, but retiring Brown and Cully, only leaving Cully 3 as their remaining coal plant. But instead of replacing all of that capacity and energy with one massive, expensive, risky gas plant, CenterPoint proposed 1,150 megawatts of solar and solar plus storage, 300 megawatts of new wind, and 460 megawatts of fossil gas combustion turbines, or CTs. The difference between a CCGT and a CT is the CTs are largely used as peak resources and as capacity resources because they're not nearly as efficient as a CCGT, really don't serve the purpose of a baseload power plant, but rather serve as a peak resource and as a capacity resource, which we'll talk a little bit more about. So that was their plan that they filed with the commission in mid-2020. And this is just pie charts from Veterans Act, CenterPoint's actual filing, just to show in 2016. This was their plan, largely remaining reliant on fossil fuels for most of their resources versus their plan that they filed this go round in mid-2020, which eliminated quite a bit of fossil gas from their plans and remained 12% coal with only Cully 3 and a whole lot of renewables. But again, the IRP is not a binding process. It's an informal document. It's an important document because anything the utility would file before the commission to ask approval to build or procure needs to be, quote unquote, consistent with the IRP. So while the IRP itself is not a formal binding document, it is directly connected to future proceedings, such as the one that we're going to be talking about here today for their combustion turbines. So now we're on to the CenterPoint filing and effectively why they're asking, which is around their IRP plan that they filed in mid-2020. Their generation transition plan, as they outlined in this filing, is slightly different. The generation plan that they filed in this case, they continue their commitment to closing the 730 megawatts of coal-fired power capacity. Instead of the 1150 of solar and solar plus storage, they say that they are adding 735 to 865 megawatts of solar. I've outlined some of that activity at the commission. I know folks are well aware of the Posey County solar project down there, but there's also the Wart County solar project. So that 400 megawatts of solar capacity was just approved on October 27th by the IURC, and there's the cause number 45501, where the IURC approved those power purchase agreements and those other agreements related to those projects. And then be aware that on August 25th of this year, in cause number 45600, CenterPoint is also seeking approval of the 185 megawatt Vermilion County solar project and the 150 megawatt Knox County solar project. Those projects in total equal 735. So there must be some additional solar out there that they're looking at and potentially filing for in the future. But that is what we know today as far as CenterPoint's commitment to those investments in solar. Instead of 300 megawatts of wind, they outlined that they will be pursuing 200 to 350 megawatts of wind, although to the best of our knowledge, we have not seen any filing to date with respect to CenterPoint seeking approval for any wind projects, although it is still outlined in this proceeding as being part of their generation transition plan. And the last piece of the generation plan that they outline in this filing is the 460 megawatts of fossil gas turbines, which they are seeking approval of. They filed this case, cause number 45564, which was filed on June 17th. Now, on to the proceeding itself, the CenterPoint filing. What are they specifically asking for in this case? They're asking for the IURC to approve at least $323 million to construct their two new turbines that they'd like to build. I say at least because we all know, these estimates are getting old. Prices go up, and especially in today's world with the supply constraints that we're seeing, and also significant increases in commodity prices. It'd be interesting to see what that price is today. But anyway, at this point in time, they're seeking $323 $23 million for those two plants. Associated with those plants is also $27.3 million on an annual basis for a new pipeline, which we'll talk about a little bit later, to deliver the fossil gas to the new turbines. And they also have some small requests in there for some environmental compliance projects at their coal facilities, $12 million for a new coal dry ash handling facility at the A.B. Brown coal-fired power plant, and $19 million for some new ponds at both the Brown site and the Cully site to deal with environmental issues, primarily flows from runoff from wastewater, stormwater, coal piles, and other wastewater that accrues. We're not going to be speaking about that today, and speaking only for CAC. We're also not going to be addressing those issues in our testimony that we'll be filing next week, but that is also part of this ask, so folks are aware of what is in that filing and what are they specifically asking the IURC approval for in this particular case. Why are they asking for these combustion turbines? Well, I pulled two quotes. I'm not going to read these quotes. We'll post this presentation to our website, and you can read them now. But these combustion turbines, you'll notice a trend here, necessary to complement the company's renewable energy resources. And you'll notice when the intermittent renewable resources are not available for short or prolonged period of times. And you'll notice the other quote on the bottom, also allow CenterPoint to install large volumes of renewable energy. And then a duplication of that quote, when the intermittent renewable resources are not available for short or prolonged periods of time. So these combustion turbines are effectively serving a couple of purposes for CenterPoint. First, we've all heard, that CenterPoint is predicting these turbines will generally run probably less than 5% of the time, being a resource to meet peak energy needs. Those couple of moments a year where offices are still open, factories are still churning out their products, everybody's getting home from work and school, air conditioners are running, people are cooking dinner, and a heavy load on the system in the summer or the wintertime. And you need a little bit extra juice to meet those peak demands. That's what these peak resources are designed to meet. They're also serving what's called a capacity need for the company. Utility companies have two obligations, if you will. First of all, they have an energy obligation, and that means they have to ensure that there's enough energy on the wires, on the grid, so when customers turn on their lights come on 365, 24/7. They have that energy obligation. But they also have what's known as a capacity obligation, where electric utilities have to have enough capacity on hand to meet that peak demand, plus a little reserve margin in case units go down or there are weather problems or other things. Whether or not all of those resources are running at the same time or not, under current regulations that Indiana utilities face, they're required to have sufficient capacity on hand to meet load at that given peak moment in time. So these plants not only are serving as a peak energy capacity for the company, but also serving as a capacity resource for the company, which is one of the big challenges with renewable energy moving forward. Because renewable energy, while I don't like the word intermittent, it is non-dispatchable at the moment, unless and until we get better with large-scale storage, with longer duration times. But at the moment, for the most part, renewables are not dispatchable. I don't like the word intermittent. So we do need some resources on hand to meet and follow that load. We believe there's better options other than gas combustion turbines, which we'll talk about in a minute. But so they do have different multiple purposes: serving peak load and meeting their capacity requirements, and load following resources, if you will, to their claims about smoothing out some of the load fluctuations with quote unquote intermittent renewable resources. But anyway, either way, they tend to blame intermittent renewables all the time. And it's been a little exhausting hearing that for the better part of a decade now. Here are some of the key dates for everyone's education here. They filed their case on June 17th before the IURC. We had that fantastic field hearing on October 13th, and thanks to everybody who came out and who spoke and who was there. That was a really effective field hearing, so that was good to see. November 12th, we'll talk about this a little bit later after I'm done, but November 12th is the comment deadline requested by the Oecc to get consumer comments into the commission. That's coming up quickly. Next Friday, November 19th, is the testimony deadline for intervening parties to the case. That means the parties that have intervened formally in the legal proceeding before the commission are required to file their direct testimony in the proceeding on or before November 19th, in which they make the case that the intervening party wants to make in that proceeding. And we'll talk about the intervening parties here in 1 second. December 20th is what's known as a rebuttal testimony deadline. That's when CenterPoint is allowed to file what's called rebuttal testimony to anything that all of the intervening parties may say in their direct testimony on November 19th. Then, towards the end of January, there are 4 days reserved at the IURC for the evidentiary hearings. That is where all of the witnesses that have filed testimony in the case, all of that evidence is entered into the record officially before the commission, and that is when all parties to the case, including CenterPoint, have the opportunity to cross-examine all of those witnesses in that case, should they choose to do so. So that's what the evidentiary hearing means. Certainly open for public viewing, but not public participation. And I would imagine the IURC will live stream those hearings as well. So there is that functionality within the IURC now to live stream evidentiary hearings. So if you have an interest in watching the evidentiary hearings in this case, those pending any changes to the procedural schedule will occur beginning on January 26th, probably at 9:30 in the morning. And then after the evidentiary hearings are over, it's pretty much a waiting game. There's some level of legal filings in the case, sometimes some motions and briefs filed by the company or by stakeholders in the case. There's also what's known as proposed orders. Parties will file what's called a proposed order, or how they believe the commission should rule in the case. And then we all sit around and wait for a final decision from the IURC, which we're generally expecting sometime in mid-2022 or next year. Generally speaking, these type of large generation cases take about a year from start to finish before we get a final order from the case. So just be aware, between the end of January through February, March, April, May, it'll be a little bit of a waiting game, a little bit of a legal process with no activity that requires public involvement. Then at some point, the commission will issue their final order. I mentioned the intervening parties filing testimony, so folks are aware. The parties to this proceeding, the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, who is effectively in every case before the commission. We, of course, have intervened in the case. Citizens Action Coalition. Sierra Club has intervened in the case and intends to file testimony. We'll also see testimony from Sunrise Coal. It's been interesting watching the coal companies the last couple of years in their engagement at the commission. We never really had coal companies engaging at the commission and also in the policy discussions at the State House. But as coal plants are retiring left and right, and they are uneconomic and on the way out, we now have the coal companies engaging in these proceedings and fighting gas, which has been interesting to see. And then lastly, we have the industrial group. Industrial group is a frequent, if intervener before the commission. They are a group that represent a large industrial users of energy. And in this particular case, the industrial group at this moment in time consists of Country Mark and Toyota. So those are the 5 parties, intervening parties in this proceeding that are all expected to file their testimony on next Friday. Now let's talk about the projected monthly bill impacts from this filing and the expected bill impacts from this filing. This is directly from the public testimony of Matt Rice in this proceeding. They're anticipating that the impact from this filing and this filing alone will be approximately $23 per month. for customers, an extraordinary sum of money. For two combustion turbines that will serve customers less than 5% of the year. Extraordinary, $23 a month, while customers are already struggling with unaffordable utility bills and living expenses. Poverty is on the rise, and to ask customers to give more at this point in time is just unthinkable to Citizens Action Coalition. However, that's not necessarily what CenterPoint is telling the commission are the total sort of impacts from their entire generation plan. Keep in mind, this request in this proceeding is part of their larger plan. And so as part of this proceeding, they filed the estimated impacts in total from this entire generation plan. And they're projecting that the savings from this plan will be, first of all, there will be savings. When you retire coal plants, you are eliminating quite a bit of O&M costs from customers' utility bills. And you're, of course, eliminating a whole lot of fuel that customers pay from. So with the retirement of these coal facilities and the exiting from the joint operations at Warwick, CenterPoint estimates that the total annual savings from those retirements will be $143 million per year. They are estimating customers will save somewhere between $18 and $24 million a year from the sale of the renewable energy credits from their solar facilities and future wind facilities, I suppose, although we haven't seen any wind filings yet. And so customers, by selling those renewable energy credits into the REC market, customers will realize annual savings of somewhere between $18 and $24 million. And then there's also the securitization of which customers, they're predicting and estimating customers will realize an annual savings of about $68 million. And I'm going to touch on that just a little bit. Folks may recall Senate Enrolled Act 386, Senate Bill 386 from the 2021 legislature that dealt with the securitization of electric assets. That bill was at the request of CenterPoint Energy and was solely with respect to the Brown coal-fired power plant and all of those stranded costs associated with the Brown coal-fired power plant. One of the issues with the clean energy transition is we have a lot of sunk and stranded costs on these coal plants that customers are still paying for. And at the same time, these plants are retiring, and we're replacing these plants with new resources, new clean resources that also cost money. So CenterPoint is requested that the state allow them to use securitization for A.B. Brown stranded costs. Keep in mind, I went back talking about 2005 when the company decided to invest over $500 million in these coal plants. These are the costs we're talking about. We could have avoided all of these stranded costs on these coal plants had the company made a different business decision back in the mid-2000s with respect to their generation portfolio. But they are the ones that chose this path. And so therefore, customers are now faced with these enormous stranded costs on these coal plants. What securitization does, just quickly, is allows them to effectively refinance the mortgage, if you will, by taking those stranded costs, putting them in a highly rated bond, selling that bond into the bond marketplace, and reducing the annual costs to customers, basically refinancing their mortgage at a better interest rate. And so they will be removing, according to the company, about $68 million in annual costs from customer rates as a result of the securitization of the stranded costs left on A.B. Brown. So those would all be all the savings, $143 million, plus the $18 to $24 million from the renewable energy credits, plus allegedly about $68 million from securitization. Taken with the annual costs as part of the generation plan from these fossil gas turbines they're requesting in this case, that's about $79 million on an annual basis for customers. The renewable resources that they are going to have been or are going to be requesting, they are saying will be somewhere around $111 to $141 million on an annual basis. And then those securitization charges, keep in mind, they're selling these, they're refinancing the house. So rather than customers having a $68 million annual mortgage, customers will have a $23 million annual mortgage, saving that $45 million or so because of the securitization. Keep in mind, these are all estimates. All of these savings, all of these costs are estimates, and also in large part predict future outcomes that are yet unknown, such as the outcome from the securitization case, such as the outcome from a rate case, which would need to be filed in order for these O&M savings and the securitization savings to be realized from customers. And so all of this stuff is predicated on events that have yet to be unfolded. And so I emphasize that what they're asking for in this case is $23 a month from customers. These are estimates and claims the company is predicting may happen in the future, but all of this stuff is unknown. None of this stuff, other than the $70 million a year for the fossil gas turbines and the costs below, are at issue in this proceeding. Everything else at this point in time is somewhat speculative and unknown. So let's not lose sight of the fact that this case is CenterPoint's asking for $23 a month from their customers, although it is part of a larger plan in which CenterPoint intends, I believe, they're hopeful that they're going to file their securitization filing in 2022 and then file a base rate case later the next year in 2023. And it's through that base rate case where all of this dust will settle. And so what they are saying is that when all of the dust settles, if you will, that they are expecting on an annual basis somewhere between a $16 million decrease to a $27 million increase, meaning that they are guesstimating that the monthly impact from the entire generation plan could be a monthly bill decrease of $4 to a monthly bill increase of $7. However, I repeat again, that this generation plan in total is not at issue in this case, nor is securitization, nor is this a base rate case where any of these savings are going to be realized for customers. What's at issue in this case is the company approving an additional $23 a month on customer bills, just so we're clear about that. However, they did make this presentation in their testimony to emphasize from the company's perspective that these combustion turbines are part of a larger plan as well. One little minor detail, one of the advantages of renewable energy, if you will, is it doesn't use any fuel. No volatility of gas prices, oil prices, coal prices. And so one of the factors that go into the planning process with respect to resources is the price of gas. And if you look at the testimony and the IRP, you'll note in Matt Rice's testimony that the price of gas they used to support their selected portfolio, which included these turbines, over that 20-year timeline, ranged from a gas price of about $1.95 to a high of $3.01 over that entire 20-year time frame, meaning that analysis said gas will range in price from $1.95 to $3.01 between 2019 and 2039. Well, we've all seen the articles about the increase in the price of fossil gas in the marketplace. And the EIA, if you look at the EIA data and final Henry Hub prices, you'll see in August, it was at 407. In September, it was at 516. In October, it was at 551. I know that the closing price at the NYMEX for November of this year was $6.02, although daily spot prices, daily hub prices are now hovering around $5 and are showing a little bit of downward pressure, but where gas prices will be in the future is unknown. Needless to say, the price of gas at the time of this filing or at the time of this planning, the price of gas is actually nearly double what the company used to support these. And that is a huge consideration when the commission is trying to make a determination of is this a just and reasonable and a low risk investment for customers. And CAC says no way, because part of the issue with fossil fuel power is it exposes customers to the enormous risk of the price volatility of fossil fuels and service disruptions, supply disruptions, and those type of things. So let's move to clean, renewable resources that don't use any fuel at all, and then we don't have these price volatility issues. Also, you've heard us talk, lots of talk about this pipeline, which is part and parcel, I suppose, with this power plant. Part of this filing, Vectren is requesting approval for that enormous $27+ million on an annual basis to pay for this new pipeline. Here's just a visual of that pipeline so folks know what we're talking about. That's the TGT, or Texas Gas Transmission Pipeline Lateral, known as the Henderson County Expansion Project, 24-mile pipeline to be built through Henderson County, Kentucky there, underneath the Ohio River, into southern Indiana there at the Brown Power Plant. So that's what we're talking about with this pipeline lateral, 24-mile new investments in fossil fuel infrastructure and a pipeline delivering fossil gas under a valuable water resource in the Ohio River. There is a separate proceeding at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, otherwise known as FERC, dealing with the pipeline. Texas Gas Transmission filed on June 25th an application for approval at FERC. FERC is the federal agency that approves interstate pipelines such as this. In their petition that they filed for approval on June 25th, believe it or not, Texas Gas Transmission requested that no environmental impact study be conducted. Not necessary with respect to this pipeline. No need to evaluate the impact on climate, greenhouse gas emissions, and other things. Please don't conduct an environmental impact study. On July 9th, FERC publicly noticed the application, which opened up a comment period. CAC and others filed our protests on July 30th. Our initial protest, speaking only for CAC, we of course said that an environmental impact study is absolutely needed. Secondly, they shouldn't approve this pipeline because the plant's not approved yet. How can they approve a pipeline dedicated to a plant when that plant hasn't been approved? And furthermore, Citizens Action Coalition asked FERC to hold public hearings in the communities that will be impacted by the construction of this pipeline. On July 29th, FERC sent out another notice seeking scoping comments on environmental issues that they should consider. CAC and others filed comments where we talked about, FERC should require on environmental issues that the company evaluate reasonable alternatives, that they look at climate, emissions, downstream emissions, emissions from drilling, emissions from transportation, emissions from storage, that it wasn't just the emissions inside the fence of the plant that had to be considered, but the entirety life cycle of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the fracking of gas, the transportation of that fracked gas, as well as the storage, that they have to look upstream and downstream on all of these projects. And then thankfully, on October 7th, FERC issued a notice of their intent to prepare an environmental impact statement. CAC and others filed some additional comments just last week on November 8th related to additional scoping comments to that environmental impact statement. And we largely kept our comments to the need for the company to evaluate reasonable alternatives, most notably renewable energy demand response and energy efficiency. So that's a little bit about that FERC proceeding. At this point in time, there's no public comment period or public engagement allowed. Haven't heard anything about public hearings, but we'll see if FERC holds some hearings, which would be great. And then quickly, there's a better path forward. We're talking about cost, we're talking about risk, we're talking about our environment, Mother Nature, and we're talking about public health. First and foremost, above all else, the climate crisis should absolutely guide any and all resource decisions related to energy. And it's simply unthinkable in the eyes of Citizens Action Coalition in the midst of the climate crisis and the impact that we're seeing before our eyes on a daily basis with weather events and other disruptions, that we would approve a new pipeline to move fossil gas across the country under the Ohio River, opening up a new marketplace for future investments, and build another fossil fuel power plant. To us, above all else, climate crisis should guide all resource decisions, which should lead to a rejection of this facility. A second, need. We have to keep in mind this is a filing by an investor-owned utility seeking significant sums of customer money and what's basically called a certificate of need. Does the company need these gas turbines? We believe that within their IRP, their sales forecast, especially for potential load coming from industrial customers, was highly flawed, that they overstated what their load would be as far as what they would serve in the future. And so, lots of us will be taking a look at, do they actually need these turbines to meet their legal obligation to serve customers? Furthermore, one of the cheapest ways, if not the cheapest ways to manage peak load is through demand response. What do we mean by demand response? Well, at the residential level, we mean those air conditioning load management programs where they cycle air conditioners off. But more importantly, what we're talking about is industrial demand response, where companies sign contracts with large industrial users who agree to sign contracts that allow the company to call on them during moments of peak demand where they shut down production for a period of time to immediately reduce demand on the grid. It's an incredibly cheap resource if it's managed correctly and effectively, and the proper price signals are put in place for those companies to sign up for these programs. As a matter of fact, NIPSCO cited their demand response programs in Northwest Indiana as the reason they were able to retire the Bailey coal-fired power plants up there. So demand response has enormous potential to cost effectively manage peak load. And demand response in the CenterPoint service territory is abysmal right now. And so we definitely believe there's enormous opportunity in CenterPoint service territory with respect to demand response, especially on the industrial side, to cost effectively manage peak load and avoid construction of new power plants. And again, energy efficiency, energy efficiency, energy efficiency, the cheapest resources to meet customer needs, reducing future load growth. We can meet all future load growth through investments in efficiency, and the company should be aggressively spending on energy efficiency programs for all customer classes. We need to put in place robust low-income programs, which include both meaningful weatherization programs to weatherize the structures that low-income households live in, which are generally far less efficient than most, and also assistance programs for low-income customers in meeting their energy burdens on a monthly basis. And then, of course, community solar, distributed generation, reinstating the net metering rule, making investments in storage. That is the future. The future is distributed generation, community solar, storage, load closer to the grid, distribution level investments, not these large, massive fossil fuel power plants. The economy, the markets are going in a different direction. We need to reduce our carbon. We need to get away from fossil fuels, and we need to be investing in where the future is going, where Wall Street is going, and where the markets are going. And that is solar, storage, energy efficiency, demand response, and clean energy. And then just quickly, to point out some other cases of notes going on related to CenterPoint South. There is the Texas gas case before FERC, docket number CP 21-46. That is the FERC case. Wanted to make sure folks were aware of the recent IURC approval for CenterPoint South gas customers of nearly 20% on your gas bills. So happy holidays to everybody. And then also folks should be aware of cause number 45612, which is also a CenterPoint South gas filing where they are seeking $280 million above and beyond the 19.25% rate increase they just received. They are seeking an additional $280 million from CenterPoint gas customers, $49 million of that under the TDSIC, or the Transmission Distribution Storage Improvement Charge statute, and $230 million in what they're calling compliance projects with federal mandates related to their pipelines. Nonetheless, be aware that CenterPoint has before the commission right now on the gas side a request for nearly $300 million, the equivalent of what they're asking for in this electric case. And don't forget also the active solar proceeding as well that CenterPoint filed back in August, which we talked about earlier. And with that, I thank you for your time. Again, I'm Kerwin Olson, the Executive Director, and I will turn it back over to Bryce and Kelly, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Kerwin. Kelly is going to update us on the Oucc action. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all both so much. And thank you to everyone who's joining us both on Zoom and Facebook Live. I know I just learned a lot, and I work for Citizens Action Coalition, so I hope you're enjoying learning a lot alongside us as well. I'm going to make a quick plug. We're going to talk a little bit about contacting the OUCC, but then we'll begin the question and answer portion of this meeting. So I've seen a couple questions on Facebook Live. We will get to those. And if you're on Zoom, feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A function that you should see towards the bottom of your screen. But again, I'm here tonight to talk to you about contacting the OUCC, the Office of Utility Consumer Counselor. One thing I'm remembering throughout Kerwin's presentation is that when you work on utility issues, there are a lot of acronyms to keep track of. And the OUCC is an important one to know, because that is the state agency that is supposed to represent customers in cases like CenterPoint's. And they are accepting public comment in this case until November 12th. So we've got just a couple days left. Now, CAC and a couple other groups have been working hard to get folks to make their voice heard on this case. The Sierra Club's been working on it, and so have the organizers of the Direct Action Facebook group. They've done an awesome job getting folks to take action on the page, but they've also done some flyering. So we appreciate everyone for everything they're doing to help folks get engaged with this case. Now, why the heck are all of us telling everyone to contact the OUCC? Couple main reasons that I'd like to touch on real quick. As Kerwin's presentation demonstrated, cases like CenterPoint's are really complex. You know, with the integrated resource planning process, 2 of them that affected this current gas plant case, there's a lot of planning and modeling and highly technical information. And folks at the OUCC, and the other acronym to remember, the IURC, for the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, people in that regulatory world spend a lot of time thinking about the technical stuff. And that's really important, clearly. But they also need to be thinking about the human impact of cases like this. When you reach out to the OUCC and you share a story about how it feels and what you have to do to be a person who's paying the highest electric bills in the state, it's important for them to hear that. Also the environmental impact as well. There's a lot of technical things to consider. They need to think about the people. And then the other big reason we want you to reach out to the OUCC, as Kerwin mentioned earlier, our regulatory environment is a little bit unique here in Indiana. The 5 folks on the IURC are appointed by the governor, and the head of the OUCC, the consumer counselor himself, is also appointed by the governor. So a little bit different than our elected officials, which is why it's so important that you make your voice heard. Now, if you have already contacted the OUCC, thank you. If you have not, CAC has worked to make it really easy for you to make your voice heard. I'm going to chat a link into the Zoom chat for everyone. You can click that and you can very easily send an email to the OUCC after entering your contact information. I'm also adding a comment down to the bottom of the comment section on Facebook Live. It might be easier to take action via text. You can also text CAC to 52886, and I'm making that available in the chat on Zoom right now and also on Facebook Live. Look at me talking and typing. But we really appreciate everyone who's made their voice heard and everyone who's worked to make their voice heard in this case. Obviously, we've got a long time until the final decision is made, but it's been great to see so many people get engaged so far. And I think I'll hop back to Bryce so we can start the question and answer section.
Thank you, Kelly. We do have some good questions in the Facebook chat. First one, William had a few, but why keep the 12% coal, Kerwin?
Well, we agree. That's a very good question. In my view, they're keeping 12% coal because, the coal industry does still have some political influence in this state. CenterPoint has been a historic user of lots of Indiana coal, over 2 million tons on an annual basis, I believe. And so I think in part, it's to placate the powers that be with respect to maintaining some contribution to Indiana's coal economy and gaining the political influence and political goodwill, if you will, from that. Also, it allows them to say we have a very diverse set of resources. We have coal, we have gas, we have solar, so on and so forth. But in my view, they're primarily hanging onto that coal for political purposes. That's how I would answer that question.
The all of the above strategy. Yeah. Which we've heard for years. Next question from William. What would be the continued effects of the A.B. Brown site on the surrounding community, including the ash pits, ponds, etc.?
Well, the impacts, the legacy impacts from those investments are real. Pollution of groundwater, air pollution from migrant dust and other things. And so, we rely heavily on our friends at Earth Justice and at Hoosier Environmental Council and at Sierra Club with respect to a lot of the issues around coal ash. And we've generally heard good things about the company's plan to deal with their coal ash to date. So I think the company's intent is good in trying to minimize the impact, but there's still some cleanup that needs to be done. And hopefully that harm to local communities can be minimized.
Thank you, Kerwin. And just a sidebar, but Indiana is home of the most coal ash ponds per state in the country, right? Still. So we got a lot of work to do on that, I would say. Next question from William is, what is the true reality of how likely it is that we can prevent the construction of any new fossil fuel production through these actions? Why would CenterPoint decide not to build the gas plant?
Well, CenterPoint wants to build the gas plants. CenterPoint wanted to build a gas plant 2 years ago, and the IURC said, no way, Jose. So, we're going to do everything we can. We've worked to inform the public and the media on the filing, driving comments to the Oecc and to the public. We're going to file our case, our testimony next Friday in an attempt to defeat get the IURC to reject these plants again. And so we're all in fighting for the rejection of these units. And we'll have to see where the cards lay. But keep in mind, the IURC said no the last time. So let's keep our fingers crossed that this time, we'll all put on a very strong case, as I'm sure we will, as we did the last time, and we'll get a positive ruling from the IURC. If we don't, there's some opportunity after that. So we'll, decide which way we're going to go after that. But at the moment, we're all in and trying to stop this thing in hopes that we get a similar outcome to the outcome we got 2 years ago where the IURC said no. So that's the direction we're heading now. Keeping our head up, keeping the fight going. We're going to make a strong case and hope that the commission does the right thing and denies.
And we just keep putting our one step forward and keep fighting. So Lavender has a question. If the rate hike is denied, can CenterPoint go forward with the build of new plants with other funding?
Well, they wouldn't. Let's just say utility companies are extremely adverse to risk, and they really only want to spend other people's money. So if they cannot recover the cost from customers, I don't foresee any path forward for the company building those resources. So the commission has to approve it if the company wants to build it. So to answer your question, no chance. There's no chance that the company builds the thing if they can't make customers pay for it.
I think that's it for questions.
However, I would say technically, yes. They want to build it with somebody else's money other than customers, sure, but they're not going to do that.
Has that ever happened in your time at CAC? 16 years?
No. There's nobody more adverse to risk than a riskless monopoly utility company. So they want to recover every single possible penny that they come from customers. And, they see their, primary responsibility is their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders. And that means delivering dividends, consistent earnings, and maintaining, a good credit rating and a high stock price. So that's what these guys want to do. And so not paying for it themselves is the exact opposite of sort of that fiduciary responsibility that they have to their shareholders.
Yeah, as you said, it's really easy to spend other people's money.
Especially when you have an embedded rate of return in every dollar you collect from customers. So sure.
So every dollar they spend, they get a rate of return back guaranteed. Is what
Pretty much.
Yeah. Well, that.
One
Go ahead,
more
Kelly.
question. Seeing one more question. We've talked a lot about state level, having folks reach out to the Oecc, which is a state level agency. Is there any room to get local officials involved in this work? Is there any role that they can play?
Well, I think it's always incredibly helpful that as many elected officials and other local leaders speak out. However, as was evidenced at the field hearing, as has been my experience in my time at CAC, very, very few elected officials really will stand up publicly and testify against utility companies, which shows the enormous scope of influence that these investor-owned utility companies have, not only at the State House and with regulatory commissions, but also at the local level with local officials, with other community leaders. They're very, very good at what they do. It's not just the campaign contributions that they dole out. It's the relationships they build. It's the funding for local community initiatives and schools and feel-good things. And so many, many times local leaders are incredibly hesitant and reluctant to sort of speak out publicly. That said, absolutely, you should reach out to local officials and try to get them to take a position against the plant. Because look at Indianapolis and the great work that Sierra Club did with the Beyond Coal folks and Power Indy Forward here in Indianapolis by getting the Indianapolis City Council, to make some strong statements about the energy transition of AES Indiana, Indianapolis Power and Light. And that went a long way, I think, as to where their energy transition plans are going. So yes, absolutely. Talk to local leaders and have them. Anything that you can add to a case before the commission where you can see that sort of resistance from not only customers, but also the community, that we don't really want this. We don't really want this in our backyard. That goes a long way in evidence that the commission has to sort of consider as they're saying, is this a good investment? Is this a just and reasonable resource for customers? So, yeah.
Well, I think that's it. Cecilia asked if this is going to be available later. Yes, it will be. So we will make sure that everybody who signed up in the Zoom link, through our Zoom link, will have a copy of this. We'll send to you later. And it's recording live on Facebook right now. So you can go back and look through that. Lavender did ask as well, what's the timeline of the Oecc hearing decision? And you did cover that in the spreadsheet presentation. So if you want to go through that again, or I'm not sure.
Oh, well, the evidentiary hearings before the commission are that last week in January of next year. And then it'll be a waiting game. And we are anticipating mid 2022. I would say we're going to see a ruling sometime in June. May see one a little bit earlier. But, I don't think we'll see anything before May. So.
Well, very good. I just want to say to everybody watching and anybody down there in Evansville, we understand the pain that you're going through with these rate increases. I had the opportunity to canvass across the state, including in Evansville occasionally, and talking with folks who were having to make that hard decision, whether to each month, each week, each day, whether to heat or eat. It's unacceptable. So that's why we do at CAC what we do. Nobody in this country, in our state, in our community should have to make that tough decision while the utilities continue to make money hand over fist on the backs of those folks. So just want to say that, and to echo what Kelly said, It's really heartening to see the group down there do what they have been doing, organizing their communities, putting pressure on, it was soon to be putting pressure on elected officials. And that's what needs to happen in these cases, as far as I'm concerned. That being said, there is going to be a rally. The Direct Action Against CenterPoint Energy folks are putting on a rally at 5 o'clock in front of the CenterPoint headquarters on Friday. So if you're listening to this, you don't know about that yet, show up, speak out. The more people, the better on these issues. And that'll be your opportunity to be seen and to be heard. I think that's all we have. Kelly, do you have anything else?
Nope, appreciate everyone being here tonight.
I second that. Really appreciate everybody's attendance, and we're just a phone call away. If anybody needs to get a hold of us, you can find us. We'll be there. Thank you very much. Everyone, take care out there and have a great night. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.